welcome to Adventures in Life. I'm your host, Earl Beecher. A few years ago, the Orange County Business Journal asked me to do a series of articles on earthquakes and other disasters and how we should be best prepared for them. And this has been an item of preoccupation with me ever since because the danger is real. I have asked our guest today to come in because he is one of the people who is in a position to give us some pretty sound advice. His name is Robert Goode, better known as Bob, and he's with the Z Medical Service in Huntington Beach, California. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Earl.
Let's approach this subject. The possibility of a disaster is always with us.
Yes.
I contacted the U.S. Army engineers and the Geological Survey people and other people around to prepare to do these articles. And they said the possibility of an earthquake of a magnitude of 7.2 is a possibility. And they had figures about 53,000 people killed and 100 and some thousand injured. Well, besides earthquakes, we have El Nino, we have all kinds of things that could happen.
Yes,
that
we
could
do,
affect
yes.
us. So what I'd like to do is to start today with the discussion, what can an individual do? And then we'll move as to what you need in your home to be prepared. And then maybe where your company, at work or at school. And finally, the neighborhoods, how we should be working together in order to be prepared in case there is an emergency.
Thank you. Actually, one of the weaknesses is the individual making a decision to actually get prepared. A few years ago, we had an earthquake in San Francisco.
Yes.
And a year or so following that, there was another one in the Santa Cruz area. One of the media people was interviewing a local resident up there and asked him what he felt about what he should do after the first earthquake up there, and he said, get prepared. And he said, well, where are you at this time? And he said he hadn't done anything. And that's very typical.
Well, once we're past the earthquake, then we don't have to worry till the next one comes, right?
Right.
And that won't be for another 150 years.
Well, apparently they think that.
Yes, I'm afraid all of us tend to do that.
So actually, I feel that what really is necessary is that each individual needs to take a look at their family situation, their exposure, if they're away from home a lot, or if they're close to home. There makes a difference. If their car should have to have a little supplies because they're always away from home, then they should have something there.
Something in the car as well as in the home.
As well as in the home.
What do they need to have in each of those places? What somethings are we talking about?
Well, primarily water and food. Those are the first two items that they should have. First aid measures. You need to understand a little bit about the physiology of first aid, but you need to take care of bleeding and breathing and respiration. So
you're talking about being able to help somebody who has been injured in regard to their breathing and bleeding problems.
And circulation. And these things are important because that's a critical situation.
Yes.
But once you have controlled the breathing and the circulation situation and control bleeding, the first aid items that are necessary can be a myriad of items, but primarily keeping an injury clean and sterile is highly important, and to treat for shock. And so,
well, how can you keep it clean and sterile? Say that it happens when you're out on the freeway somewhere and you
Sure.
find somebody that's been injured.
Well, that's the reason the first aid kit is valuable, is because there you should have within it products that are sterile and that you can apply directly to the injury. And to
ointments and dressings?
No, not ointments, but primarily dressings.
Okay.
To just keep the injury from getting contaminated and stopping the bleeding.
That's tourniquets, isn't it?
No, you don't use tourniquets.
See, you know how much I know. Okay, help.
Okay. No, controlling bleeding can basically be done by direct pressure and using pressure points. Tourniquets are kind of a thing of the past, and and unless you have been trained, you just don't use them.
Okay, because you tend to put them on too tight, leave them on too long, and they're real problems.
Well, it
develop.
destroys your circulation, and generally you almost have to determine that that part of the body is going to have to be removed.
Ooh.
Because of the blood not circulating.
I see.
So
tourniquets are a thing of the past.
Stay away from tourniquets unless you've had some training, and then you know how to use them.
Where does one go to get the training?
Well, just about any source is available is good training. The first aid through the Red Cross is good. There are private individuals, and our company, we teach a lot of first aid and CPR classes.
Z Medical Service does that. And your company is not just in Huntington Beach. There are branches around Whittier and a lot of other locations?
Throughout the United States and in some foreign areas.
How about the fire departments in the local city? Don't they sponsor things from time to time?
Sometimes they do, and sometimes clinics and nurses will put on programs, but I think a lot of those are burdensome, and the best programs generally come from people who are really geared up to do it and can really do it on an ongoing basis. We have here, it's called Z Advantage, but we have probably 20 some odd different training programs that companies will buy, used to train their people. This happens to be emergency preparedness. But
this is a video.
And it's a video, and it has a workbook, and it has material in it for the employees to use. And this is a relationship between an employer and employees in training and in a variety of areas. We have the first aid kit here. This is an individual kit put out. We put this one out for the Southern California Water Company, but it's very limited in products, and primarily
I see things like an ice pack. Now, is that something to keep things cold?
Ice pack is a good way to relieve swelling, to take some of the uncomfortable feeling out of an injury area. Mm-hmm. It's a very handy treatment. But primarily this package would be filled with primarily water packets, such as you see here. Each packet can be opened up and it's sterile. It's a one-time usage packet, but it's a dose. The rest of the water stays perfectly pure until you need it. And so it breaks it down for you. Or if somebody else needs a drink, you're not using the same container, so you pack.
Well, now, this packet, that's something that you get a gallon of water and you put this in it?
No, it has to be purchased from a company that can prepare it properly, and it has a shelf life of approximately 5 years.
Is this water?
Yes.
Oh, so each packet is just water. It's not something you put in like in the Army when we used to put drops in?
No.
No.
No,
okay, I want to be sure.
This is strictly drinking water for emergency purposes. And then there is food products as well that have 5-year lifespan. So the nice thing about those is that they take up a little bit of space, and you can tuck them away, and you'll have 72 hours worth of product.
I feel like we're talking two things at the same time. We're talking about treatment of people who are possibly in shock, bleeding, or are having respiratory problems, which is the real first aid.
Right.
Then we're talking about water and food. The reason I think that this comes about, when I was doing the study before, they said that if there is a major disaster, you must figure that the police, the fire, and that are going to be going where there are severe crisis areas and will not be available to just help everybody.
Right. Epicenter, they'll be where it's most.
Even that, they may not even be able to get anywhere if the bridges on the freeways collapse and block the roads.
True.
And so we have all of these problems. And they said you should figure at least 72 hours before any resemblance of normality is resumed.
Absolutely. At least 72 hours.
At least 72. So you need water and you need food. And these packets are just very emergency. There's not enough water there to last a lot of people. So we're going to pause for a public service announcement. Then we're going to talk about the basic package that a person needs to have in their home.
Okay.
So stay with us. We will be right back. Our guest is Bob Goode from Z Medical Service in Huntington Beach, California. Bob, we've been talking about how much water a person would have to have. How much would you have to have in your home to take care of your family during the emergency period before normal services could be restored?
Well, I think at least the amount that would be carried in your water tank in your home would probably be sufficient for a few days, as long as you didn't use them for bathing and other
No, just for drinking purposes.
For drinking purposes, I think your water heater would probably carry, it's about 40 gallons.
Yeah,
and if all the more you could have in that area would be helpful. But you have to turn off your water line immediately so that you don't get any influx of new water.
So why don't you want new water?
Well, there's always that possibility of water contamination, and that's when the city shuts it down as well. But you want to make sure that you don't get contaminated.
While there was the break for this public service announcement, I was curious, and I asked, what is this?
Well, that's a light stick. It's a chemical light. It's plastic. You can break a chemical inside the vial.
You just take it and break it this
bend
way?
it, and then it will glow for approximately 12 hours. Enough light to use it for emergency purposes or for identification and so forth.
I'd never heard of a light stick before. I think you'd always have to have, you know, a flashlight at the house. But this would be something to have in camping. If you ever got lost and helicopters flying overhead looking for you, you've got a light they can see.
Well, it certainly is pretty bright in the first few hours and would probably do well.
Now, in the home, we have no food products here that we're showing. In fact, your company doesn't stock food products, does it?
Just one item, which is a food supplement, and it's a 5-year life on it in the package, and it's just like breaking off a biscuit, fairly chewy, and it's got the chemicals or the resources in it to sustain life.
Well, I can always put in a plug for spirulina, and if anybody doesn't know, I've done several shows on the subject, and I'm a firm believer, so you can always call me after the show and say, what was that stuff you were talking about? In the meantime, Bob, in the home you need to have blankets, you need to have things, normally you would have those in the home. What special, besides a first aid kit and water and food, what would a person need? Well,
if people are on medication, they should know how to acquire their medication rapidly. A lot of families feel that they can set aside a container or a backpack which would have a blanket and food and water and a few of those things of first aid that they can take with them if they have to leave their home. Obviously, in situations where there's fires, people have to leave their home really quick.
Yes.
And if they had a package like that they could gather up real quick and certainly keep their medication with them if they have any, then they're self-sustaining for a while. And under a major disaster, the cities are just not going to be able to meet your individual needs.
No. How about fire extinguishers?
Yes, very important to have a few of those around.
There's always talking about these contraptions on the ceiling of fire alarms, but you need to have extinguishers or something before help can get there, and in a major disaster, help may not come.
Oh, definitely.
We often hear stories that there's more damage done by the fire that follows an earthquake than there is by the earthquake itself, by the earth movement.
That's true. People have put on safety valves on their gas meters, which will turn their gas meters off, but certainly that's one of the scary things about an earthquake is going around and checking to see if you have any leaks. And the city really says not to turn off your gas because they don't want to have a complete shutdown throughout the city. It's hard to get it back up with all the homes. So they like you to check it out first, but that's a hard thing to do to make sure that your gas sources are not leaking.
When I was doing the study preparatory to writing the articles for the Orange County Business Journal, one of the things they stressed is that very often you have parents who both work and the children are away at school, when the disaster strikes, the children can't get home or the parents can't get home, there should be a plan within the community for the schools, what they do and how they get the children back to the family or how they take care of them until the parents can contact the school.
Yeah, the schools are mandated, I think, in most cases, to keep the children in the facilities. They have emergency plans to take care of that. And businesses, for the most part, do also.
The same idea.
And we plan these programs for some of the companies that we deal with and help them with the products that they need. But it's very obvious that they may not get home for a day or two.
Yes, especially if you are going from Huntington Beach to Santa Monica to work or something. It could be a real challenge. I do know that we were discussing with businesses in preparation that they have certain minimum things to feed their people or take care of them, and also that they contact neighboring businesses, like if you're in a industrial park, and know who have medical people on staff, and that you have a prior arrangement that you can call on their help or their expertise as needed if you have no one in your own business that has that capability.
Well, that certainly is a possibility. I believe there is a lack of ingenuity on the parts of business people to reach out to one another to find out what those things. And so quite often they do not have any kind of alternative plan.
Tell me, do most businesses have a safety officer?
No. Well, yes, they have somebody designated to do that, but they're not really trained. That's where we come into play with a lot of companies, is that we provide them the expert help that they need.
I know you do more than just disaster preparedness. You come in and there are certain governmental requirements.
Right.
Like, for example?
Well, we take care of compliance to state and federal OSHA. We take care of the training needs that they may have. We take care of the products that they need, both in the safety, the first aid areas, and in the safety compliance. We've saved companies quite large sums of money in fines that they had received because they neglected to take care of things. One particular company in Costa Mesa, we saved them about $84,000 in a $90,000 fine. And we did it in 5 days.
I bet they were grateful.
Yes, they were.
I say, the other thing that comes to my mind, we have the problem, if the children come home from school and the parents aren't there when a disaster strikes, the neighborhoods need to get together and know an adult in the neighborhood who is home most of the time, that becomes sort of the captain of the neighborhood, where the children can go so that there is supervision, that they are being cared for in case the parents don't get home immediately.
Yeah, I think in the community you'll find that the schools, if they know there's a disaster, they won't release the children until they have somebody that they know is a parent or a person designated to take care of their children. But once the children are released from a school and there's a disaster perhaps in their neighborhood, they should personally have already had instructions from their parents to know where they should go so that they can meet, and the family will know where to find them.
Now, I was looking through the manual that you have over here, this catalog. Whoops, and it talks about things like CPR and burn care. How much does an individual person need to know about these things?
Actually, CPR has really been a wonderful invention or discovery. I can remember when I was a Boy Scout.
What does it stand for?
Cardiopulmonary resuscitation.
Put that in English.
Restoring breathing.
Okay.
And it restores circulation at the same time. I was just going to say, when I was a Boy Scout, we were taught how to relieve somebody, a drowning victim, and those theories have all disappeared since CPR came aboard and the training from CPR, and it's been a wonderful method. A lot of lives have been saved through the use of CPR.
How long does it take to get trained so that you would be a help rather than a hindrance in it?
Basically 8 hours.
8 hours of training.
8 hours of training, and approximately 4 hours every 3 or 4 years to keep up to date.
Let's pause now for another public service announcement. Stay with us. We will be right back. Our guest is Bob Goode of Z Medical Service in Huntington Beach. Bob, the key thing here is cooperating with people who are near you so that if a building collapses and you know there are people who need help, you know how to help them.
Sure.
And if you're one of the ones needing help, you know whether the people there are part of the problem or if they're giving you help. Is that right?
That's right.
Communication, when I was first doing this study on this, they said, you won't be able to use the phone, the police and the fire won't be able to do it. But cellular phones, you've suggested, may be a solution somewhat?
Somewhat, yes. And for those people who have radio communication, they'll be able to communicate to the outside within their own limitations.
What would you say is the one thought you'd like to emphasize and leave with our viewers today?
I think it's that the individual should get prepared for himself. It is a time when you can't really depend on the outside, and if you're self-sufficient within a neighborhood or within a community, you may be able to help others, because there's always going to be needs, and there's going to be people that do not have enough to be self-sufficient. Our supermarkets can be empty in practically overnight in food stuff.
Well, in a recent riot, they were empty in about a couple of hours.
Right, and in a couple of days or in a few hours, water will be gone. Just all of these items are very necessary, and people will gobble them up just as quick as they can. So being self-sufficient is very, very important.
Now, for a community overall plan, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't the fire department have the primary responsibility for creating the community plan?
I believe so. There's generally in all cities a disaster planning commission or a department, and I know Huntington Beach has. I've been to their meetings a few times.
Yes.
I have sat in on a county-wide practice on an airplane crash and watched how they triaged and how they came in and took care of the injured and so forth. But it is very burdensome, and it just goes to show that when these things happen, people are going to have to take care of themselves for a while.
Okay, so that's the most important thing, folks. Take that to heart. Get the necessary water, food, first aid equipment, blankets, things that you need. Have a plan in the neighborhood so that if your children come home and the parents can't get there, there's somebody in the meantime who can look after them in the neighborhood. Somebody designated so your child knows who to go to.
Yes.
And the schools will probably be looking after them anyway until that time. But have the plan in place and know what you're going to do, because nobody knows when a disaster is going to strike. We've been warned and warned and warned about earthquakes in California. Now we're being warned and warned about El Nino and floods. Who knows? And then there's always the airplane crashes and things that you mentioned. So on a major scale or a minor scale, a disaster is an emergency.
Yes, it is.
Bob, thank you very much for being our guest today on Adventures in Life.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us, and please join us soon again for more Adventures in Life.